All right, I think we are on. Just confirm. Facebook. All right, I think we are on. And this is an awkward time. It's 3:18 p.m. in the afternoon, so most people in New Zealand, you are working, and I know that. But this is the only time we could have done this, so here I am to do session number 2. And I'm actually going to start this session just with a little bit of worship. I felt to do that. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to jump into the worship set from Bethel Church that they are doing. I'm going to jump into this worship set. So whenever you're watching this, please hashtag replay so that we know you watched it, and you can hopefully get something good here from the session. But I'm just going to play the song here, and hopefully you can hear it. And we're going to start with a bit of worship, and I'm going to get into this. I know 3:15 is an awkward time, and our next session I will do it at a better time, but let's get into it. If you're on here, feel free to say hello. Let me know you're here. Let me know you're here, and I'm just going to play something. Hopefully you can hear it too. You're in the intake of my breath and the exhale. You're in the very intake of my breath and the exhale. Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. You're in the intake of my breath and the exhale. You're in the very intake of my breath and the exhale. You're in the very intake of my breath and the exhale. Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. You're in the very intake of my breath and the exhale. You're in the very intake of my breath and the exhale. You're in the very intake of my breath and the exhale. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. You're right here, right now. You never left, you never did, you never will. Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. Wow. It's in your name. It's in your name. In the very intake of my breath and the exhale. You're in the very intake of my breath and every exhale. You're in the very intake of my breath and the exhale. Yahweh. Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, God. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your love, Lord. Emmanuel is in the room with us, closer than the skin on our friend. All you have to do is say his name. Emmanuel. He comes closer than you can breathe. Wow. Oh, we breathe in your glory. Wow. And then we breathe out your praise. Oh, we breathe in your glory. And then Man, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. I hope you could hear that. If you could hear that, let me know. But I wanted to start with that. I was just listening to that and it wrecked me. God is so good. He is so good. Man, He is so good. I love that the gospel is so simple that it can be preached to any people group at any moment in time and they can receive the fullness. I love that the gospel is so simple that it could be preached and demonstrated to any people group at any moment and they could receive it in its fullness. They can receive Jesus in His fullness and they don't have to work for it, earn it, work it up, try and strive and try and get the badges, that they can just receive the fullness. Wow, the gospel, the beautiful gospel. Man, I feel God in the room. So today's session, this is session number 2, and I'm talking about who do I say I am. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Joseph, and Joseph Wilson. I live in Auckland. I have a beautiful family. I've been married for 9 years. We have 2 little children. One's 4 and one's a year and a half. And I live on the North Shore. I run a fitness training business here, and I also lead a house church. And that's some of the stuff that's going on in my world. But I'm here today just to share with you a little bit about the importance of you knowing who you are, not in the sense of who God says you are, but in the sense of you knowing who you are. I grew up in the religious circle when I was a kid in India. I got taken to school, Sunday school on Sundays. I got taken to church. I grew up around a Presbyterian style religiousness, whatever you want to call it, and when I came to New Zealand, like, I had known all these things. I'd known of them. I'd known about a man named Jesus. I'd known about this guy named David. I'd known about stuff, but I didn't know him. I didn't know I could have him. I didn't know he could live in me and through me. And so one of the things I do is coaching and mentoring, and I do that online, I do it offline, and I find this all the time in all my years. Hey, Catherine, so good to see you here. In all my years of walking around the church circuit, okay, I have found this gap, and there's a whole bunch of people stuck in what I call the sucker zone. They're stuck in the sucker zone. I call it a sucker zone. Jesus in Revelation 3 called it lukewarm. But they're stuck in this place of, I know of something. I know how God thinks, but I don't think like that. And they're stuck in this place of, I should think like that, but I don't think like that. Right? Running my coaching programs, I remember a specific point last year where I asked one of the girls, and I said, do you believe you are beautiful? And her response to me was, well, God thinks I'm beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, that's great, but do you believe you're beautiful? And her answer, she didn't. Her answer was no. And so many Christians, or so many people who know of God, who walk with God, are just happy to know how He thinks without allowing how He thinks to shape how they think, without allowing how He views life to shape how they view life, without allowing the reality to come and pierce into them and make it their reality, which is why I believe we are seeing a generation, or we have seen generations of people who have not walked in the fullness of what God has for us, because we are satisfied with how He thinks without allowing that to become how we think. And I remember in that moment asking a whole group of people after that, and most of them knew that God thought of them as awesome. God thought of them as beautiful. God thought of them as great. God thought of them as conquerors. God thought of them as able to do so many amazing things, but they themselves did not believe it. And it came out in the conversations when they would say things like, well, God believes that, God thinks that. I don't really, but it's okay because God does. But then if I don't really believe what God's saying, what do I really have? I have two beautiful, beautiful daughters, and I tell them every day that they're beautiful. I let them know every day that they're princesses. I let them know every day they're beautiful. But I'm not saying this to them so they think, oh, Papa thinks I'm beautiful. That's just the first step. But if I keep saying it to them and they never actually believe that they're beautiful, the whole intent of me sharing what I'm seeing as a reality and sharing my heart with them is missed. This is why I titled this little message called Who Do I Say I Am? Because that is the most important thing. Because the truth is, the word is filled with truth on who you are, on who I am. And that's the bottom line. That's the only line. This is the truth. And according to this, according to this, you are a giant killing, mountain taking, more than conqueror, royal priesthood. You are Jesus on the earth. According to this, according to the truth, you are amazing, already equipped for every good work that he prepared before the foundation of the world for you. But somewhere along the line, we have a disconnect. And I want to just explore that disconnect today. You know, if I don't ever allow what he thinks of me to become what I think of me, I miss out on what he has for me. And God is pulling us to this place. So I want to ask you this question. Who do you say you are? Not who does God say, not who does your dad say, your mom say, your family say, but who do you say you are? In Proverbs is an interesting scripture that says, as a man thinks in his heart, so he is, so is he. And there is a way that you believe inside you that is way more important. And this is where religion ruins it, and ruined it for me. For me, my whole childhood. You know, when I came to New Zealand, I was 11 years old, and I got taken to these churches and to little home groups. And there was one pastor, he would always come pick me up on a Wednesday night and take me to a home group. Now I know that it was God drawing him to pull me. But at that time, I'm like, what is this older guy coming and picking me up, taking me to these meetings with these older people? I'm falling asleep in the meeting, right? Because it's too crazy for me. But at no stage did somebody come and try and get me to mix my life with the reality of what God says. The whole time, all I saw was, well, God says that, you need to believe it. You need to believe it. So right now, I pastor a house church. And in my house church, there's all kinds of stuff. But when you pastor, those of you that are pastors, you know, like it's crazy. It's crazy. I've been saying this for years. I'm like, if God doesn't call you to be a pastor and you choose to be one, it's the dumbest decision you can make, because you won't have any grace for it, right? It's the craziest job, being a pastor or leading people in a church setting. But I'm faced with this. Like, I've ended up in marriage counseling situations. I've ended up in so many different kinds of counseling situations. You come face to face with this one thing of, well, God says that, but I don't know if I believe that. And I believe that the gospel is so simple that whenever I face a situation where, God, you're saying this, but I don't believe it, it is so awesome that I can just say that to him. I can just say that to him. I still remember when I got saved 11 years ago, 11 years and 1 month ago, June 8th, I was drunk in the backseat of a church, and this girl was prophetically singing a song, and a heat went through my body. I sobered up, and I remember looking at my whole life. You know, when I was a kid, I got taken to vacation Bible school, and I was part of the drama team, and I pretended to be David in one skit. I was a pastor in the other skit. My whole childhood, people kept telling me, you're going to be a pastor one day, and I didn't really like it, because it looked like being a pastor was boring, you know, at that time, because that's all I saw. But when this moment happened and I encountered God and I saw my whole life flash in front of me, I started to feel his love. And for the first time in my life, did I suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I can be anything in front of this God and he is not going to reject me. Oh my gosh, I could say anything in front of him and he is not going to reject me. I could be the most messed up guy right now and it cannot separate me from him. That reality that just went boom, and it set me so free. See, I don't know if Christians would accept me in that moment, but God's just like, in the middle of your sin, Joseph, in the middle of your worst, hideous sin, I looked down and I sent my son for you. And so there is something about God being like, hey, we can have a conversation about anything. But God, like, I'm really messed up in this area. No, we can talk about it. And so I love that when God goes, Joseph, you're more than a conqueror. And I go, well, I don't know if I'm more than a conqueror. He goes, let's talk about it. I've met pastors that don't want to talk about it. I've met leaders that don't want to talk about it. But God himself, the creator of the universe, is like, come on, let's talk about it. And you know, when we talk about it, he's not trying to force me into a situation. He's not trying to force me. You know how sometimes people have a conversation, but really like a bad salesman. God's not a bad secondhand car salesman. He's not trying to, I'm going to make you buy what I'm saying, Joseph. And I started to realize that on the inside, I already knew. And this is what I want to talk to you about. You have a spirit, you have a soul, you have a body, you have a heart. I believe these are 4 things that make up every human. And these 4 things need to come into alignment. So there came a point where you, out of your mouth, you believed in your heart, you confessed with your mouth, and you received what Jesus did for you at the cross. You received it. And suddenly you started to see the light. Your spirit became brand new. You were already turned into everything that you will ever be. Ever. And I love how Benji says it. He says you're as in as you can be, as much of a son as a son can be. And it's a fact because it was paid once and for all. And then for years, this question of, well, why don't we see it manifested? Why don't we see it manifested? And the reason we don't see this manifest in our life is because we don't know how to deal with our soul. We don't know how to deal with the soul realm, the mind, the will, the emotions. This is the realm which is going to determine whether we allow what's in the spirit to flow out into the body and through the body. And so the word says, renew your mind. You get transfigured. We just talked about it, me and Benji, about how you get transfigured. You get transformed by the renewing of your mind, which is by the renewing of your soul, which is will you allow your soul to submit to your spirit. And so it's really intriguing to me because on one side, I have seen, and in one of my groups, I am watching somebody who was stuck in prostitution, or someone who was stuck in drug addiction, or someone who was stuck in horrific situations. Like even in our gathering, we have someone who's been through sad things, scary things as a kid, get a touch from God and completely transform, and her allowing her soul to submit to the reality of the spirit, and suddenly her body's changing, her life is completely changing because she has allowed her soul to submit to the spiritual reality of who God says she is, of what God has done for her. But in most of our circles, we see that the soul is trying to dominate the spirit. And this is why Galatians talks about living in the spirit. You will automatically, by default, without even trying, without even thinking, you will put to death all the deeds of the flesh. You will put to death all the stuff that is the enemy of God, which means it's the enemy of your created intent, which means just by letting your spirit rule and your soul submit, you can walk into the fullness that God has for you. The Ephesians 2:10, the good works that he prepared for you beforehand, you can walk into that just by practicing how to get your soul to submit to your spirit. And over the last 4 or 5 years, this has been a frustration of mine in church circles and leading groups and leading things, seeing that the soul is not talked about. We've almost devalued the soul and devalued the body, and we talk about a spiritual reality that we do not allow to manifest in a natural realm because we are ignoring some of the elements. The same thing about our body. I've run a fitness training for 7 years, and I am telling you, in the church circle, we don't talk about our body. It's almost like we think the body is carnal. When really the carnal nature is a way of thinking. It is something deeper than just your body. If God had a problem with your body after you got saved, he would do something about it. But you need your body. In fact, 2 Thessalonians, I think it's around chapter 5, verse 23, around there, where it talks about that your spirit, soul, and body may be presented blameless before the coming of our Lord Jesus. And so we have ignored the important elements, and we've made Christianity a spiritual thing that doesn't have enough tangible results. And so I get into these counseling situations and I ask people, okay, you're fighting this thing. Do you talk to God about it? No. Why not? Why don't we just have an open conversation with God about stuff? I mean, here I am, and I'm part of a team of 4 and somewhat leading what's happening here in the embassy, but there's so many things I need to talk to him daily. Daily. I can just be so real with him, and then as he speaks to me, allow my soul to submit to the spiritual reality that he got for me at the cross. And so I have this question for you. Who do you say you are? Who do you say you are? You know what's crazy? The devil knows how important this thing is. That is why that's the thing he attacks. And check this out. God thinks this is so important that the Spirit leads Jesus into the wilderness to go through the testing of what I am talking about here, because the devil comes and says to him, if you are, and he's now testing the very thing. Who do you say you are, Jesus? Sure, your mom had an angelic visitation, and sure, she knew what to call you. She knows your prophetic future. She knows your death. Sure, all that's true. What do you say about who you are, Jesus? And in that moment, because he knows that he knows that he knows who he is, he answers in a way that doesn't require justification. And I'm asking you today, who do you say you are? You know, last week I was buying some protein powder from a supplement shop, and I've been doing a vlog. You guys know what vlogging is. I've been doing a vlog, and I was in there with my vlogging camera, and the guy said, look, I don't want to be on your vlog, but you can film everything else. So I just started to film stuff, and then when I was leaving, he said, well, so what's this vlog about? And I said, well, spirit, soul, body, heart. And then he wanted to know about this spiritual connection. And he's like, well, what does the spirit mean to you? And in our conversation, we unpacked all the religious stuff, and he was blown away that Jesus didn't have to be so religious. But then when I was leaving, he asked me this thing, well, what would you say you are? And without a hesitation from my mouth, I said, I'm a son of God. And he didn't even flinch. He didn't even flinch. And in my own head, in my own soul, I was like, what did you say? And in my own soul, I almost had to check for heresy, because out of my mouth, it just bubbled out of my spirit, because I'd just been prophesying over him, and I just told him the last 7 years of his life. I told him his future. I told him things about his present, and his jaw dropped, and he couldn't believe I knew all this stuff about him, because Papa knows stuff about everybody. And then when he said, well, what do you say you are? Because he's trying to say, well, you call yourself a Christian or a Baptist or whatever, And I'm like, well, I'm a son of God. And I freaked out for a second, because my soul was like, whoa, Joseph, what are you saying? How can you be a son of God? And then I'm like, I am a son of God. And then on my drive back, I'm like, yo, this guy didn't even flinch. I don't even know what his theology is. I don't even know what he believes. But when I said to him, even if he's an atheist, right? Like, and I'm like, I'm a son of God. Like, he wasn't even affected. He's like, oh yeah, I see that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, who do you say you are? This question, if you can seek out the depths of the answer, the depth in the spirit, and allow your soul, which is constantly trying to speak to you about your past, remind you of your sin, remind you of your present, remind you of the things you find hard. Your soul is constantly trying to fight you and battle the reality that Jesus has already accomplished in the spirit. And religion has tried to create this thing where the soul can try and make you holy, but it can't. It can't. And this renewing process, I keep coming back to this question, who do you say you are? This question is so important. There is a point where Jesus is looking at his disciples and he asked them, right? Where's that place? Now, I'm not a theologian. I read the Bible. I love the Bible. I'm not a theologian. I love Jesus. And there's a part where he's in Philippi and he's like, who do people say I am? Right? He's just getting engaged. He's like, I know who I am, but I want to know, who do people say I am? And they're like, Elijah, John the Baptist, all this kind of stuff. And then he looks at Peter and he's like, well, who do you say I am? And I love this part because Peter is like, well, you are the Christ. And then he looks at Peter and he goes, you, my friend, you didn't get that from your soul. That was revealed to you by your Father in heaven, my Father in heaven, to your spirit. You got it, boy. And Jesus makes this declaration in that moment of, if you want to know who you are, there is only one place you can get it, and that is from your Father in heaven. And it must be revealed. It doesn't matter how much I've memorized scripture. It doesn't matter how many sermons I've listened to. It doesn't matter how holy I try and make myself look, how many works I try and work up, and how many good things I do. If I did not get the revelation of who he says I am, I will not be able to then say who I say I am. Not being able to call yourself what God calls you is as bad as when somebody says, what's your name? I say, well, my dad, John, he calls me Joseph. What's your name? Well, my sister, she calls me Joseph. My wife, she calls me Joseph. And I can't say, I'm Joseph. I'm Joseph. And I'm calling you to this place. Who do you say you are? Because that's the only thing the devil's going to target. And he will target it in your own thoughts. He will target it through any family member he can get a hold of. He will target it through your clients. He will target it through your friends. He will target it through anything he can get a hold of. But once this question is solidified within yourselves to the depth, where now suddenly your spirit, soul, body, and your heart, which encompasses it, is all in alignment, suddenly everything, the world, the book of truth opens up to you. And the whole game changes. I'm still shocked at people who think that they walk with God and that is separate to their life. That they walk with God and it's separate to their marriage. They walk with God, it's separate to what kind of friend they are, what kind of boss they are, what kind of employee they are. They walk with God, but they have this two separate lives. I'm still shocked because we are still trying to separate spirit, soul, body, the thing that God put together. We are trying to separate it. What God has put together, we keep trying to separate it and call it religion. So there's some scriptures that really blow my mind, right? 1 John 4:17, if you can, go there. I've got the Passion Translation here. This scripture blows my mind. By living in God, love has been brought to its full expression in us, so that we may fearlessly face the day of judgment, because all that Jesus now is, so are we in this world. Man. The end of this scripture, when I read it, I was like, no, I'm still battling this scripture. No way. I'm still unpacking this like, are you kidding? Could it be? And I remember when I shared this with a group of people, and I'm like, just as Jesus now is, so are you in the world. And they're like, oh, well, we're like Jesus. I'm like, yeah, just as Jesus now is, so are you in the world. And they're like, yeah, we are like Jesus, we're like Jesus on the earth. I'm like, no. As Jesus now is, so are you in the world. And we fear it. It's almost offensive. It is so good, it is almost offensive. And our religious mind somewhere is trying to separate what God has joined together. And God comes and he goes, well, my spirit's going to live in you. We're going to be one, John 17:1, we're going to be one, and religion and our soul and our mind keeps trying to separate what God has joined together. We are one. And the scripture is messing me because just as Jesus, so am I. And I read the Passion and it's like, just as Jesus now is. I'm like, well, Jesus now is in a glorified state. I mean, his name's above all names. Like, he's bada boom, bada bang. Like, he's up as he is now. I am here. What? And this has begun this journey the last 3 to 4 months for me of, well, what does that look like? And I start hearing testimonies of some of my friends, some of the people I know that have like transfigured, right? We already know some people who've turned into white light. And then this other man that I met a few weeks ago started talking about how in one of his God times, he was just getting so into the Lord that he started disappearing. He like couldn't see some of his body. He was freaking out, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, just as Jesus now is, so am I, so are you in the world. And I look at how Jesus was on the earth. I mean, he's way more now, but how he was on the earth. And Isaiah talks about that, why he came. And he came to set the captives free. He came to help the brokenhearted. He came to preach the good news to the poor. And suddenly I start to see that you are called to do that. I am going to do that. If somebody says, who are you? Would I say that? Would you say that? If someone had a problem and you know that Jesus has a solution to every problem, would you say that you have the solution to their problem? Because it's found in him and he's found in you and you're found in him. It's so good. It's so good. It is so good. I am still working my way through this thing. I know the day I get it, I will be sitting here in front of you and I will have to put some form of a mesh, or I would have to wear a veil or a burqa, or a burqa as you call it. I didn't do something because I'll be glowing all up in here. I won't even need lighting, right, when I get it. But God's calling us to this place, man. He's calling you to this place. Who do you say you are? And I remember so many times where I'm like, I don't feel righteous. I'm still battling this thing. I'm not righteous. I don't feel righteous. But then the word is like, you are the righteousness. You are the righteousness of God, because Jesus is righteous. He died. His righteousness now is in you. You are righteous, Joseph. And I remember practicing. And this is why I believe we are failing. So let's get in some real talk right now before we end this thing. This is why I believe we are behind. Is because we have somehow made church not a place we practice, but a church is supposed to be a dojo. It's supposed to be a training center. It's supposed to be a practice place. The gathering of the saints. We get together, encourage each other. We're practicing. Exhort each other. Build each other. Practicing. Cover each other with love. Practicing. Speak truth over each other, prophesy over each other, release each other, practicing. And there's something that, church, we've been missing because we love the spiritual reality because we don't have to do anything for that because Jesus already did it at the cross. But to see it manifest in the natural, your soul has to be trained, and we don't like training. Our body has to be trained. Paul himself, 1 Corinthians 9:27, he says, I beat my own body into subjection, lest as I preach, I myself be disqualified. This is why 85 to 90% of the church doesn't preach, because they know they're already disqualified. How can you preach when you know you're disqualified? And they think they're disqualified for all weird reasons. And this is where it's so important that we start to train, because based on the book, they're not disqualified. And training. Will we do repetition? Will we go after it? Listen, man, this is crazy. Paul talks about the crown, the race. I'm running my race like one that wants to win. Do you understand that competition was not really a problem? The problem is that we compete with each other and try to make ourselves feel better. It's not even about the race anymore. The truth is, if I'm running my race and I'm running hard, I will provoke all my brothers, all my sisters, like they provoke me to run harder, to give more, to give it all, to lay it down and go for it. And Paul talks about this walk with God, and he relates it to an Olympian and the commitment level of an Olympian. And he's like, imagine if this lady, Lisa Carrington, you know her, world champion rower. I watched her 3 years ago. One of my friends is getting married. We went to set up his wedding venue. It was at the yacht club in Takapuna. And we look out the window, and there's Lisa Carrington. It's in the morning. It's freezing. She's carrying her little canoe, kayak, chucks it on the water. Boom, she's going. We're cleaning up the place, setting up the place, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then she finishes her session 2 hours later. I'm like, whoa, man, she's training hard. Olympian, right? We come back that afternoon to set up again, and we're just finishing up our setup before things go, and suddenly I see Lisa Carrington coming again. I'm like, what is she doing? gets her canoe again, gets into the water again. Another 2 hours of training. And here we have Paul, and Paul is like, yo, if you're going to walk this thing with God, you're going to have to treat it like this. Look at this Olympian. And I look at Lisa Carrington. She's waking up, eating, sleeping, breathing, her kayaking. She's a gold medalist. She's a champion. And Paul is saying to us, if you're going to run this thing, you need to run it like this. And imagine Lisa Carrington giving up her whole life. Do you know how many Friday nights, how many Saturday nights her friends would have messaged her? We have a birthday. Come, let's have fun. Let's go out. And she's like, no, I got to get to bed by 9:30 because that's how I recover. How many times people are like, come on, we're going to go and do this. And the crowd is calling, come on, Lisa, come on, let's get it. And Lisa's like, no, I was born for more. I was born to be a cut above. And I'm going to live by it. And she goes to bed and wakes up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. Everyone's still sleeping. Saturday morning, and Lisa's awake by herself on the lake doing laps. And Paul is like, be like Lisa, Joseph. You want to see God's destiny for your life? Then commit, son. Give it. Give it. Stop holding back and give it. And this is why we missed it. 85, 90% of people, they know God, but they haven't given it. They haven't given it. And he's calling you to this place of training. When you start training, but instead of going around the lake in the morning, you wake up and you're like, I am more than a conqueror. I am more than a conqueror. I am the righteousness of God. Just as Jesus now is, so am I on the earth. And you wake up in the morning and you do the reps and you train and you train. And suddenly when game time comes, what is game time? Let me tell you what game time is. I get saved. Okay, and I'm starting to see the spiritual reality, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing is real. Like, God is real. What the heck? Why didn't anyone tell me? All this kind of stuff. I invite my pastor to go preach at a church that belongs to these Sri Lankan friends of mine. We get there. They don't believe in the presence of God. And I watch my pastor start from Genesis to God and his presence all through the Ark of the Covenant, take it all the way down to Jesus coming, Jesus dying, and where the presence of God is now. And then I watch him lay hands on all these unbelieving believers. And they all pop, except for one guy. Everybody hit the floor that day. They felt the Holy Spirit. They got slain. And I'm new to all of this. So I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, these guys didn't even believe in this. And they're getting whacked. And the only guy that didn't get whacked was my friend. And later on, he told me he had rejection in his heart. But anyway, we're leaving the meeting. My pastor's gone. And suddenly I hear, I'm like, what the heck's that? I turn around and the lady who was the worship leader at that time is manifesting a demon. And I'm like, what is that? And the guy who came with me, one of my friends, he'd been saved a bit longer than me. He was like, yeah, that's a demon, bro. I'm like, a demon? Like exorcism of Emily Rose demon? And he's like, yeah, bro, demon. I'm like, oh, dang, now what are we going to do, right? I'm freaking out because I've never seen this. But at the same time, my spirit's like, this is exciting. And my soul is like, this is freaky. Anyway, we bring her to the back. We start praying for her. And my friend's praying for her, trying to cast this thing out. And I'm like, what's he doing? Like, he's like, come out of here. Come out of here. I'm like, what? This lady who's from the Anglican church comes in. She goes, guys, you can see that she's really distressed right now. Leave her alone. Leave her alone. And in that moment, we're like, oh my gosh, lady, can't you see? And she left really angry. And anyway, on the ground, she's going, on one side, this girl is going, help me, help me. And she's crying. Then she would turn her head the other way, and this other voice would speak, and it was deeper. And it would go, ha, 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 she is mine. You can't get her, ha, ha, ha. And I'm watching this whole thing like, I'm freaking out. My friend, seen all this before, so he's not freaking out. But everyone else in that youth group is freaking out. And she's the worship leader. All right? So my friend calls my pastor, and he goes, hey, pastor, this is what's going on. And my pastor goes, put the phone near her ear. I'm watching all this, right? Puts the phone near her ear, and the pastor goes, hey, when you were around 12 years old, somebody sexually abused you. You need to forgive them. And this girl starts bawling. Starts bawling. And then she starts coughing. And she goes through a forgiveness prayer. And she spat out all this stuff. Right? And then later, after it all finished, when we were leaving, I said bye to her. She didn't even remember who I was. And I was in front of her for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours that night. She didn't even remember who I was. She introduced herself to me again. And so the reality, and that's what I'm talking about, game time. game time. You don't know when what you have inside of you is going to be called upon. You have no idea at what moment suddenly Jesus in you is wanting out. And when you are someone that trains and practices and does the reps, this is why me and Benji get along, because he loves doing the reps. I know he's a reps man. We've gone on trips together. I've seen him do the reps. And see, what we've done is we've turned Christianity into some are special, some are not, but really some did the reps and some didn't. One of my favorite speakers, his name is Eric Thomas. He's a pastor too, Eric Thomas. He says this thing: all were created equal, but some just worked harder in preseason. All are created equal, but some just work harder in preseason. And I'm asking you this question: as a son, will you do the reps? Because a son does the reps. You hear what I'm saying? A son does the reps. A son goes places a slave and a friend could never go. We think that sonship is entitlement. We've tried to make sonship entitlement, but a son goes places a slave and a friend will never go. Let me break it down. If you look at the Bible and you look at some of these relationships, you'll see that there are people who want to be God's slave, a servant. They work for him. There are some who are his friend. Abraham was his friend. They start to know a little bit more. They get to know some of his heart and know some of his secrets. But a son is raised. A son carries his name, his nature, his identity. A son is him. A son comes out from him. In fact, in John 3:3, you were born again. Your dad now is not on earth anymore. Your father is of heaven. He's a son. But you get to choose what you want to operate as in your soul. And there's some people who still operate as a slave. So let's look at a slave. You imagine I run a business and I have someone who works for me, a slave, an employee. They only come when it's time for work, and they want their lunch break. They want their morning tea break. They want the benefits. And when it's time to go, they leave. They don't care about the business. They want to get paid. That's how slaves think. Then you got a friend. Your friend might care a little bit. He might stop one or two people from shoplifting, even, and risk his life maybe a little bit. He might come 1 hour early. He might leave 1 hour late. He might do some extra sweeping up of your business, of your shop, of your office. But that's about it. But a son is 24/7 about his father's business. When he's going to bed, he's thinking about how he can make the business better, because he knows that business is his. When he wakes up in the morning, he's thinking about the business. He's trying to upskill for the business. He's trying to become someone that grows the business, expands the business. A slave's not thinking about expanding jack. A friend might think about expanding a little bit depending on what kind of benefit he can receive. But a son is all in, because he knows what's his dad's is his, what's his is his dad's. They are one. It's a family business. And in your soul, you get to choose on what level you want to operate. And most people still want to operate like a slave. Like a slave. And there's even a point where Jesus has to address this, and he says, I no longer call you slaves. I call you friends. And he's like, let's start to move up the level in our relationship. And then Paul comes and goes, by this, we have received the spirit of adoption, by which we can cry out, Abba, Abba, Abba. I had parents that were around my life, but I was an orphan. I lived like an orphan. I thought like an orphan. I had to protect myself all the time. I had to defend myself all the time. I didn't really know what true unconditional love is. I couldn't even receive, because I was an orphan. And then I met him June 8th, and he came all guns blazing, and he's like, I got you, boy. And I'm like, I receive. And even now there are times I can't believe that the God of this universe looks at bags of dirt like you and me and puts his nature, puts his divine presence, puts the fullness of who he is into you and me. Oh man, what an honor. What an honor. So I committed to doing the reps. And I want to ask you, who do you say you are? Who do you say you are? And will you do the reps? Will you do what it takes to move the spiritual reality into the natural, through your soul, into your body, and manifest it into the earth? Will you do what it takes? I can tell you that Jesus was a supremely disciplined man. Which one of us in the middle of revival would be able to even hear our Father say, okay, leave now. The meeting can go on without you. come up the mountain. Which one of us would even be able to hear that, let alone leave the revival and go to the real reward, which is him? Jesus was a disciplined man. Multiple times, including his own friends, his own disciples, tried to talk him out of what he was called to do. But he had trained so well that nothing could stop him. Faced like flint, he headed towards his God-given destiny. Who do you say you are? And will you train? Will you train? Will you give him that little bit more? Will you give yourself to this? You know, I know I'm going, I hope I'm not going too long. If I am, let me know. Just type in, I'm bored, and I'll stop. Jesus, right? I lost my train of thought. Oh, here we go. So many people I know, like this is what Jesus said. He said, if you lose your life, you will gain your life. Right? He didn't say if you lose your life, you will follow me and have no life. He said, lose your life and you will gain your life. This is a better life. In fact, in John 10:10, he's like, the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and he can do that here. But when you lose that life, he can't kill, steal, destroy anymore, because I'm about to give you a higher life, a life in abundance, a life that can't be stolen, can't be taken. Like, what does that look like? Let me give you an example. In this realm, somebody comes and says something, does something, insults you, says something bad about you, and you get offended, you get hurt, and the devil can come, kill, steal, and destroy. When you have gained the new life, you let go of that, and you've got your new life in Jesus, and you are so wrapped up in love. You are so wrapped up in what Benji calls effortless bliss. You are so wrapped up in this, and the same insults come, and the same stuff get thrown at you. You're not even moved. Because even though the devil's coming to still kill and destroy, you are living in the abundant life. And many of you have given your life, but you've never gained it. You've given up stuff, but you never received. You've given up things unto the Lord, but you didn't take what he already has for you, which is your birthright. It's your birthright. What am I saying about birthright? I was born August 19th, 1985. I'm not talking about that birthright. I'm talking about when I was born again. I'm talking about my June 8th birthright, when I was born from above. Birthright, when I decided to receive that. My birthright. And now I get to walk like Jesus on the earth. Even if people don't believe it or don't want it or don't think that I could. He says you can. So it doesn't matter. Oh my God. I just want to provoke you today. Will you go that much deeper? Will you let him take you into the deeper waters? Who do you say you are? I can't walk around running and telling people that I am a basketballer, that I'm a baller. But if I spend the next 2 years with that ball not leaving my skin, I spend the next 2 years ripping. Do you know that 2 years from now, I could tell you I'm a baller? You are sons. But some of you can't say you are sons because you haven't spent the time letting it sink in and seep out. Because when you spend time with him, you let it sink in, it starts to seep out. And when it seeps out like a little bit of leaven, the kingdom starts to occupy the earth. And we are now coming to a time where this generation is going to seep out like never before. And we are going to see the infiltration, the expansion of the kingdom all over the earth. And I'm so honored to be one of them, and you are one of them. So I hope this message encouraged you. If it did, please let me know. But I love you lots. It's on. We are going to get it. And if you are looking at me and going, yeah, I'm going to go deeper and I'm going to go get it, I want you to hashtag getting it. Getting it. We're getting it. We're getting it. You know, I look at Kobe Bryant, one of the greatest players of all time to play basketball, and I see his work ethic. I look at Michael Jordan, I see his work ethic. I see that Kobe misses a shot. This is towards the end of his career. He missed a shot, And the game finished, everybody left, and Kobe goes back to that same spot, and he takes hundreds of shots from that same place till he gets a certain amount in a row. He didn't even leave. This was after the game, after everybody left. Work ethic of a son. Of a son. The one that wakes up before the sun comes out and is doing the reps. The work ethic of a son. I'm challenging you. Are you going to go after the work ethic of a son? Because we are about to see all creation's been waiting. It's time. It's time. So I'm just going to end with a prayer. Father, I just thank you for this group. I thank you for Benji. I thank you for his heart. I thank you for you putting this in his heart. I thank you that it has manifested through divine design. What we may have thought was accidentally happened, that you had planned before the foundation of the world. And I just speak into this group, the 1600, the 1700, that we are going to catch this fire, that we're going to see a massive remnant of people that are going to go and do the reps. That are going to do the reps, that our faith will be demonstrated, then preached, that we will be doers, not just hearers, that we will be you on the earth, Lord. Unashamedly, we will be you on the earth. So I pray a special blessing over every person in this group and everyone that just listened. I thank you. We're going deeper with this thing. In Jesus' name, amen. So thank you some of you guys that jumped on here, man. I appreciate this. I hope you got something from it. Some of you are saying getting it, love it. Luana, Carla, Shilpa, Adrian, Benji, boom. Boom. I love that Jesus only needed 12. He took 12, flipped the whole world. Flipped the whole world. Look at us. We got a whole bunch. I wonder what we're about to flip. So love you guys lots. Have an awesome Wednesday. And make sure you look out for the next session. There's going to be 2 more sessions this week. I'm looking forward to listening to Matt and listening to Norm too. And I'll be back next week. So let's keep it rolling. Love you guys. Talk soon.